It is not sleeping, it is not injured, it is just waiting
for a signal you never learned to send. And
researchers at the University of Houston discovered something about this muscle that no one expected. When you activate it correctly
down, without getting up, without breaking
a sweat, it can reduce the sugar spike in your blood after a meal by 52%. Not walking, not standing,
sit before your next meal. Because this isn't a
fitness trick. It is a biological mechanism you have been ignoring every time you sit down to eat. And I'm going to show you exactly that should alarm you. Half of all Americans over the age of 65 are living with prediabetes right now. Not suspected, not at risk, meeting the clinical criteria. And 25% have full type 2 diabetes. That means if you are in a room with 4 people your age, the odds are what makes this so insidious. The damage is not happening when you are fasting. Your fasting glucose might look fine on paper. The damage is happening in the 2 hours after every meal, when blood sugar surges, stays elevated, and your arterial walls absorb that hit 3 times a day, every single day. Research published in Frontiers in Cardiovascular Medicine found that postprandial blood glucose spikes are a stronger independent predictor of cardiovascular disease than HbA1c, even in people without diabetes, even in people who look metabolic. 45 minutes after eating, that is not the food. That is your blood sugar spiking and then crashing. That is your body failing to buffer the glucose fast enough. And it's happening because the largest glucose disposal system in your body is sitting completely offline. Your skeletal muscle is responsible for most of the hours you are awake. It is doing almost nothing because you are sitting still. And it all comes down to one small, deeply misunderstood muscle in your lower leg. Let me introduce you to the soleus. Most people know the calf as the muscle that pops when you stand on your toes. That visible shape is the gastrocnemius. But underneath it, deeper, flatter, and running from just below your knee all the way to your heel is the soleus. And the soleus is a completely different kind of muscle. About 88% of the soleus is made of type 1 slow oxidative fibers. That matters enormously. Type 1 fibers are built for endurance as their primary fuel. They burn blood glucose and circulating fats directly from your bloodstream. And they can do this for hours without fatiguing. Here is the critical mechanism. Inside every muscle fiber, embedded in the cell membrane, are transport proteins called GLUT4, glucose transporter type 2. Leaves your bloodstream and enters your muscle cells to be burned for energy. The more GLUT4 transporters you have active, and the more you traffic them to the cell surface, the faster blood sugar clears. When a muscle contracts, it triggers 2 separate pathways that bring GLUT4 to the cell surface. The first is the insulin pathway, the one most people know. Insulin signals the AMPK and AAT cascades, which phosphorylate a protein called from the interior of the cell to the sarcolemma, the muscle membrane. The second pathway is contraction-activated and entirely insulin independent. Physical contraction triggers AMPK, AMP-activated protein kinase, which phosphorylates both TBC1D1 and TBC1D4, independently driving GLUT4 to the surface. This second pathway is why exercising muscles can absorb glucose even in people with severe insulin resistance. The door opens without needing the key. Now here's where the soleus becomes extraordinary. Most muscles, when you are sitting still, are doing nothing. Their GLUT4 transporters are sequestered inside the cell. No contraction signal, no AMP open door, driving up the post-meal spike. But the Soleus, because of its unique oxidative phenotype, because of its 88% slow twitch fiber composition, because of its exceptional mitochondrial density, responds to a specific and yet when it is activated correctly, in a very specific way, it can sustain elevated oxidative metabolism at high rates for hours, drawing glucose directly out of your bloodstream through that contraction-activated GLUT4 pathway. Here's the analogy I want you to remember. Imagine your blood closed, the big leg muscles sitting inactive, their GLUT4 doors locked shut. But the Soleus, when properly activated, is like opening a drain that does not close. It just keeps running, quietly, below the table. The reason we never discovered this before is that the Soleus is almost completely inactive when you are sitting normally. When you walk, the Soleus fires, but in a movement pattern that minimizes energy use because the body is designed for locomotion efficiency. The Soleus push-up, the movement discovered by Dr. Marc Hamilton at the University of Houston, without fatigue. In 2022, Dr. Marc Hamilton and his colleagues published a study in iScience, a cell press journal, that followed 25 participants through 2 experiments using randomized crossover design, each participant serving as their own control. What they found was this. When participants performed Soleus push-ups continuously while sitting, their postprandial blood glucose excursion dropped by 52%. Approximately 50 milligrams per deciliter less in the 1 to 2 hour window after a glucose challenge. Simultaneously, 60%. 52% less glucose, 60% less insulin, with a muscle that weighs less than your wallet. The effect size in this study was classified as huge by Cohen's d analysis, a statistical benchmark meaning the difference is not subtle, not marginally significant, not a trend. It is enormous. Comparable, Hamilton's own words, to outcomes you would expect from pharmaceutical intervention. And then a 2025 pilot study in sports, published in MDPI, tested the same movement in 10 people with prediabetes, a population that most researchers 32% reduction in postprandial glucose excursion during an oral glucose tolerance test, even without EMG feedback, even outside a lab environment. So what is the movement exactly? You are seated, both feet flat on the floor, knees bent at approximately 90 degrees. Here is what makes this different from a regular heel raise. You are not pushing up through the balls of your feet. You raise the heel while the toes and the front of the foot stay grounded. The movement is a plantar flexion that fires the soleus in isolation, not the gastrocnemius, which dominates standing calf raises. At the top of the heel raise, you passively release. You do not control the descent. The foot drops back to the floor on its own. That passive release is part of the mechanism. It allows the motor neurons to reactivate at the bottom and drive a clean contraction. 2 to 3 seconds. Both legs simultaneously or alternating. What you are not doing, you are not bouncing. You are not pushing from the toe. You are not doing a fast critical mistakes that kill the effect. Mistake 1, raising from the toes. If you push through the ball of your foot before the heel rises, you recruit the gastrocnemius instead of the soleus. The glycolytic fibers of the gastrocnemius fatigue fast. You will feel your calf tire within minutes. The soleus should not fatigue. If it does, your technique is off. Mistake 2, doing it for 10 minutes and stopping. The metabolic benefit is cumulative and duration dependent. In the Hamilton study, participants accumulated 4 continuously during whatever they were already doing. The Soleus does not fatigue at this task. This has been verified by muscle biopsy in the Hamilton study. Glycogen in the glucose and fats, not stored carbohydrate. The muscle can, in principle, run all day. Here is how to build this into your actual life. The goal is not to perform a set number of repetitions. The goal is duration. Specifically, continuous engagement during the windows when blood sugar spikes are happening. The 3 critical windows. Window 1, the 30 minutes before and 90 minutes after breakfast. This is the highest risk window of the day for most people over 40. The glucose hit from even a moderate breakfast can spike significantly. Begin Soleus push-ups before you eat. Continue through the meal and for at least 60 to 90 minutes after. Window 2, the post-lunch window. Most people sit at a desk from noon to 3 p.m. This is not a problem. This is an opportunity. 45 minutes after eating, your blood sugar is climbing toward its peak. The Soleus push-up runs silently during phone calls, meetings, largest meal of the day, and is followed by the most sedentary hours. Evening glucose clearance is also the slowest because insulin sensitivity drops further as the day progresses. Performing Soleus push-ups for 60 to 90 minutes while watching television or reading after dinner directly targets the window where the damage accumulates. Timing precision. Start no more than 15 minutes after sitting down to eat. Glucose absorption begins within 15 to 30 minutes of a carbohydrate-containing meal. You want the GLUT4 doors open before the sugar arrives. Rhythm. 1 full heel raise every 2 to 3 seconds, both legs. This is approximately 20 to 30 repetitions. 90 continuous minutes per meal window. If you can build the 3 to 4 hours across the full day while you are seated, you are replicating the conditions of the Hamilton study. What disrupts the protocol? Rushing the movement, tension in the foot before the heel rises, and long gaps between windows. Sitting without the Soleus blunting it. Days 1 through 14, you are building the neuromuscular habit. The movement should feel increasingly natural and invisible. You may notice your heel drifting toward a rise during meals without consciously starting. That is the protocol working. Days 30 to 60, people consistently report less post-meal fatigue, sharper cognitive downstream effects of a reduced insulin spike. Days 60 to 90, if you are tracking post-meal glucose with a continuous glucose monitor or a finger prick test, you should begin to see measurable flattening of your postprandial curve, consistent with the 32 to 52% reductions observed in research. This protocol costs nothing, requires no equipment, cannot be seen by the person sitting across from you. 3 things I want you to remember when you stand up from watching this. 1, your postprandial glucose than your fasting glucose. It is happening to you 3 times a day, and most of the treatment happens silently, below the table. 2, the Soleus is 88% slow twitching through a contraction pathway that bypasses insulin resistance. 1% of your body mass, hours of glucose clearance capacity. You have been sitting on this solution your whole life. 3, heel rises from the toes is gastrocnemius. Heel rises with toes grounded is Soleus. The difference is everything. Slow, passive release at the top, both legs, starting before or at the moment you eat. Here is the part I find most remarkable about all of this. Your body was already equipped to regulate blood sugar at every meal. The Soleus has always been there. 88% slow twitch, loaded with GLUT4, engineered to run for hours without fatigue. You did not need to add anything. You did not need to buy anything. You just needed to learn how to turn it on. That is what good metabolic health looks like at 50, 60, 70. Not fighting your biology, working with it. If this changes the way you sit after meals, hit subscribe. Because next week, we are going to look at what happens to your blood sugar in the first 30 minutes of sleep, and why your last meal of the day may be the most metabolically dangerous thing you do. You will not want to miss that one. Like this video if it gave you something useful, and I will see you next week.